Hey guys, it's Mike with another MLS updater, and today we're going to be focusing on the Houston Dynamo after news broke on Monday that Paulo Nagamura has been released from his first job in MLS. There's not been a huge amount to cheer about for fans this season as they sit bottom of the Western Conference, and today I've got Victor Araiza here with us to explain a bit about what's happened and where they go for the 2023 season. Okay, so I'm here with Victor. Victor, how are we doing?
Hey, Michael, great. Thank you for the invitation to your program, and always happy to be here, lending my knowledge on whatever you need. But obviously, right now it's busy times down here in Houston. Tough time because it's been a while since the team has gone to the playoffs, but
Yeah.
certainly the Houstonians here are ready for a winner.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like you say, it's been big news. Can you let everyone know before we kick off why you're the person to speak to about Houston Dynamo?
Well, let's say I'm one of the people. I'm the person, right? Obviously, anybody that's down here knows Glenn Davis and knows the work that he does with Dynamo and for a long time. But um, I'd like to say I'm a pupil of Glenn, and then maybe there I guess I can kind of start from there. Obviously, working with the Striker.com, we try to give as much coverage to the Houston Dynamo, the Houston Dash as well, which is on the women's side. There isn't as much in-depth coverage, which I think that's why the Striker got started. Right, we started with the three Texas teams in 20 for the 2021 season. Now it's expanded. It's a great project. More MLS coverage with Atlanta United, the two LA teams, three NWSL markets, and I think the interest is obviously there for soccer in the United States. So we're trying to make the most of it and give people what they want.
Excellent, excellent. Well, so we say we'll focus on the Dynamo today. Obviously, the big news that came out on Monday that Paulo Nagamura has been released from his role as head coach. What was the initial response around Houston to fans and people who work with the club?
Yeah, it's I think first thing it was shocking, right? For and there's a bit of a background here that people have to know, right, about the Houston Dynamo. Ownership has a lot to do with this. The Houston Dynamo got a new owner last year, June 2021. Ted Siegel came in. It was a big moment for the club for a long time. In the beginning, obviously, since 2006, Houston was owned by AEG, which anybody that follows MLS obviously knows the importance that they've had in the league, and they've had several different teams throughout history. But at that point, Houston, when they moved from San Jose, they were sort of the orange-headed stepchild to the LA Galaxy, right? And for after the back-to-back championships, and I'm getting a little maybe too far here, long-winded, but I think this kind of context is important, right? Gabriel Brenner, Oscar de la Hoya come in as partners in about 2007, 2008, and because of that lack of investment, the success of those early years wasn't retained.
No.
Um, MLS wanted to do away with multiple owners around 2014. That's when Brenner finds other investors, takes over majority of the club. But you know, if anybody looks at the years, obviously that on the field, that's when the Dynamo start to nosedive, start to have a decade of decline since 2014. I believe I believe that's the season 2014, 2015. That's when 2014 is the last Kinnear year. And then 2015, Owen Coyle comes in, obviously the first coach after the championship year. And since then it's been one playoff appearance. This year, obviously, it's going to be that one playoff appearance in 2017. 8 out of the 9 seasons, no playoffs for the Houston Dynamo. And obviously, because of these results, fans have been asking for new ownership, new ownership, new ownership. Testigo was coming last year. We fast forward a little bit, right? Fires the general manager who had been here essentially since the end of 2014, Matt Jordan, the sporting director, right, for lack of a better term, in the rest of the world. Pat Ramos now retained as the head coach. Pat Onstad is announced as the new general manager for the club. He brings his own staff, starts fresh with a new head coach. The search was kind of fast, right, because the season ended, I think, in the beginning of November. Nagamura was announced actually earlier this year in January.
Yeah.
It was sort of a real fast, quick coaching search. There was a lot of names that were thrown out by fans. Again, previously, because of ownership, there really hadn't been a lot of candidates in the coaching searches as far as a real bona fide manager, right? For example, like when Atlanta started and they went out and got a Tata Martino, or just free agents out there like Bob Bradley or coaches like that. It's been inexperienced guys in essentially their first big MLS job. Omar Cabrera, Tab Ramos, and now Paulo Nagamura. But Paulo Nagamura was obviously part of this project with Seagull and Onstad. And at the time, actually, it was a little bit shocking to everyone because there were names out there, especially with tied with Mexican football, which is a very obviously popular here in the United States, especially Houston with the close proximity to the border. Um, you know, Successful Mexican managers. Well, in Victor Manuel Tetich, who is now at Monterrey in Liga MX. Jimmy Lozano, who was the coach of the Mexican Olympic team, who's now at a younger coach, right? But that type of success, obviously, now he's at Necaxa. Turco Mohamed, which is he was a free agent then, and he went to Atlético Mineiro in Brazil, and now is a free agent again. So that's one of the names that's kind of out there right now. And ultimately it goes to Nagamura, right, who was in his first MLS job, came out of Sporting Kansas City too. The thought behind it was, well, he's coming out of one of the most important MLS structures. But again, just real quick, at the time, fans had a lot of questions. The club backed him, and fast forward 8 months later, I think for him to sort of get the axe is it raises questions, but anybody that's following the team this entire season, the results, the lack of progress, maybe the lack of a bit of an idea of a playing style, just goes off to show that Nagamura was a bit not ready for this level, and indeed everything the fans at the time. I guess the people who cover here at the club as well, locally, I think it's that they had made the wrong coaching hire. You can see it at the time, and now. In that sense, the season was essentially lost. But there are some positive things, obviously, which is why the club feels like they put Nagamura in terms of having him succeed, right?
Yeah.
The two biggest expensive signings in club history, which is another thing that, again, with old ownership wasn't there, the investment on the field, right? So Sebastián Ferreira was acquired from Paraguay, right? I'm blanking on the name of his old club.
Name, but
but he was at the time the most expensive transfer fee and salary combined, right? And then Hector Herrera gets signed on a free transfer from Atletico Madrid. Obviously, a player for the Mexican national team. That's something fans have been asking for a long, long time. There was a couple of Brazilian signings as well that made their way. And on that this week, they felt in that sense, Paul had to say new signings. It might not have been the entire roster he wanted, but there was some advancement there from the club. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but that's the entire situation there.
It's been a bit like you say, it was a quick turnaround from when Pat Onstad started to the season beginning and having to make all these quick decisions to bring someone in, and they felt they had the right man, obviously, but and it started off quite well. I mean, by the 1st of June, Dynamo were 7th, 5 wins, 6 defeats. So things had started relatively well, but since the beginning of June, it's gone on to be the worst side in the Western Conference, with 2 wins and 8 losses and 2 draws in those games since then. And things are slowly sort of seeped away. And you mentioned there that there seemed to be a lack of like a real sort of a playing style. He's had these players come in, big name signings, and there seemed to be a lack of sort of direction of what he wanted the team to do on the pitch. And
and I made, at least in the roster, I made throughout the season, I made the argument that he hadn't had the best roster to succeed. In a way, there was a lot of players here still left from the prior season.
Yeah.
Players that got used to losing, if you can put it that way as well, right? There wasn't a lot of turnover in that sense. I felt if this was truly the guy they believed in, there was more the club could have done, right? I think, for example, this past summer transfer window, and in MLS, there's 2, right? There's the one at the beginning of the season, which is the longest one, and then there's the 1 month, which is essentially July 1 week in August in the summer. Hector Herrera got counted for that one, right, by the
Yeah.
club, but ultimately they brought in one winger, Nelson Quiñones, 20-year-old, unproven, right, and there needs to be, I think, for this club to succeed, still, and this goes again, more seasons back, there needs to be more playmakers, more impact players on this team. Again, it's been a decade of decline to kind of catch back up with the rest of the league. Um, there needs to be better players all across here. There's, I believe, some players that, you know, again, with all due respect, on other teams, I don't know if they would be starting caliber players in Major League Soccer, but also the way the games have gone, right? I think, you mentioned where the Dynamo kind of were in the season. There's I think things you can point to, maybe that opening game against Real Salt Lake, that there were problems that still were kind of present, right? Maybe even gotten worse by this time. So I think that's the kind of progress that maybe fans will be like, well, maybe it doesn't show up in the scoreboard as much. There was games where the leads were lost, especially recently, right? There were 3 games where,
Yeah.
the games were lost in the second half. There was a real tough one in Vancouver, when the Dynamo were up. I believe it was like the 87th minute.
Yeah.
Vancouver scores a goal, scores in stoppage time. In Minnesota, they're in position to win, and again, and I believe it was 70th minute. They give up an own goal, and then they get scored on again. Excuse me. And then most recently in Seattle, but there was instances like that. I think the other one too. It's why wait now if you wanted to make a statement? Why not after that 6-0 loss at Philadelphia, which was the most
Yeah.
embarrassing loss?
Yeah.
But I think several things too, right? I mean, Sebastian Ferreira was a big investment, and they just could never find a way to find him in the box, get him more touches,
Mm.
be more direct in trying to adapt the playing style around him, right? Which, I get it. It's a team of 11 players, all this, right? But this is a player that was, there was a huge investment in. Um, Obviously, Hector Herrera comes in, and the team only won once with him. There wasn't maybe a defined role with the Mexican player, right? I think everybody assumed he would come as 6 or as an 8, and as of late, he was playing higher up the field, and actually, Darwin Quintero, which older, experienced player, maybe wasn't going to get a lot of minutes, but sort of got erased in these last couple of games, regardless. And it seems like Herrera was turning into the playmaker. So I think those little things too, and then just to kind of again go back to the beginning of the season, the expectations that were shouted were playoffs, and I think again overall maybe everybody really truly does have a part to play in this, and in the blame, right? It isn't Nagamura has his own share of the blame, but he isn't, 100% responsible. I do think the help for the roster at the beginning of the season was important, because Houston historically has always struggled in the summer after the June international break, like you mentioned, which is when they nosedive,
Mm.
because there isn't the depth in the roster. You start playing, 3 games a week. You start playing a bunch, like 6, even 8 games in a month. Um, it comes at you fast, and that's kind of where everything starts to go spiral downward. And again, they were 7th at the end of May, but they really should have been higher up. They really should have been, um, and obviously they had a new coach, but they really could have been higher up, 4th, maybe even, believe it or not, 1st place. And I'll tell you why: because they had 8 games at home out of the first 12. So
Yeah.
that should have been. They really should have had more points out of that stretch, and I think all these factors just come to play in this decision.
Yeah, and you got since June you had the home game against LAFC. You got the win in that one.
Right.
From Dorsey coming off the wing. But since then, yeah, the travel seems to be the difficult part, going away. One thing that based on this, I mean, looking at transfermarkt.com, Houston Dynamo's the value of the squad is the second lowest in the in
Right.
MLS. And you mentioned like the transfers coming in the summer and how things slowly, as the team struggles as it gets busier times. And one thing that I was reading, Pat Onstad mentioned that he knew this wasn't a top four roster, but he felt it was a team that could compete for the playoffs. Is there a little bit of a concern as to what the general manager sees this squad being capable of as well?
Yeah. Because I do think, like I said, I do think there are elements of this team that you know they should be good enough to finish seventh, right? Or again, I think there could have been a little bit more help on that side, but in that sense, they should be higher up the table. They shouldn't be last in the Western
Yeah.
Conference when they have, you know, is Darwin Quintero on maybe tired legs? I think so, but I think there was other better ways that the team could have maybe utilized him on the field, right? Manage his minutes a little better. Um, and I think that was a player that they kind of bet on coming into this season. And truly, at the beginning of the year, I mean, he was for lack of options, their better creator in attack. And for
Yeah.
a team that was struggling to score goals, I mean, there was more they could have gotten out of that guy, right? Again, we mentioned the focal piece with Sebastian Ferreira. And I don't think they gave him enough of a chance. I think the kid has 10 goals by sheer work. And you
Yeah.
see some of his goals. I mean, there's that amazing goal from you know um, below half field against Austin FC,
Oh,
right? That incredible goal. It should
yeah.
probably be goal of the year. There's another one against Montreal later in the year where Herrera gives him a magnificent pass, he brings it down with one foot, and then just
Yeah. It's got the quality,
a goal,
hasn't it?
fourth goal. A goal against FC Dallas. There's one where I believe he receives with his right and then hits it with his left. And you talk about the quality of his goals are just sometimes again by sheer will. At LA Galaxy, that win gets sort of spearheaded by Ferreira, because it's an error by the LA goalkeeper where he picks it up and he puts it in the back of the net, and they're up and running on the road. So, and those are what, like 4 goals I've spoken about it. And so,
Yeah.
I think if he had more support from the players out wide, which again maybe Nagamura tinkered a little too much with switching out players at times. I believe he only repeated his starting lineup even a handful of times. I counted over 20, but I'm sure there's probably I would bet there's probably over 25 different starting lineups. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
and again, I don't know how much you can say it's a lack of options, having inexperienced players, or just not getting the most out of this roster. But I do think there are elements there. We mentioned Quintero, Ferreira, Alberto Carrasquilla, which you could say it's another acquisition because the club made his loan permanent. Um, throughout the beginning of the year, and I would say, maybe even just because he's underrated, that might be one of the better players, if not your best player. Maybe his performance as of late has gone down, but at least at the beginning of the year, that dude was really going, your candidate for MVP before Herrera got here. Obviously, the quality of Herrera, yeah, he's coming off from vacation, but he was still a plus
Yeah.
to not find a way to get the best out of him. Steve Clark throughout the first half of the year, and especially in these last 2 games against Seattle and LAFC, had top performances.
It's a curling ball out. It's a header off the crossbar. Second effort, Clark again is denied it.
That was a big upgrade at the goalkeeper position from Marco March the previous year. They have a big investment, which, by the way, the new owner had announced last year. Tim Parker, who was at that point got a contract extension. So, and you have teenage Kadebe, which I think maybe there the prior regime made a mistake. But regardless, you have 2 center backs who are getting paid $1 million each. And I mean, if you look at the most successful teams in MLS, very few are doing that, right? And I think not getting most out of the defense, that's part of it. Yeah, but again, I do think there are elements there. Papa Pico has been a worker as well. I know there might have been some drama there as well, but just I mean that's part of the game too, right? There was drama last year with Darwin Quintero. Struggles. I mean, it's normal. Again, anybody that follows soccer all over the world knows these are things, right?
Yeah.
But that's, again, that was another concern of having a coach that was a bit inexperienced. How was he gonna, handle a professional locker room with grown men, players that have incentives in the contract, as opposed to youth. The other thing too is also, again, if we're starting to defend the coaches a little bit. The last three coaches have, for however true it is or not, have sort of come in with the tag of developing youth talent, right? Because of the roles they played.
Yeah.
Nagamura with Kansas City too, Ramos with the U.S. Youth National Team, the under-20s. Wilmer Cabrera was also with the under-17s before, obviously, he was with Chivas USA as an interim. But all these, kind of arrive with the hope that, well, they're going to play more younger guys. They're going to get the better out of the academy, and the academy players have not gotten as many minutes. Houston has not produced
No.
Enough players for the size of this market, right? I think it was Ramos that said that Houston, essentially, the population is kind of the size of Uruguay, right? So I mean, there's any lack of talent here, lack of passion. There's no reason, truly, looking at everything, all the elements, why Houston couldn't be doing what FC Dallas is doing, exporting players.
Exactly.
And that was one of the things mentioned actually by Pat Onstad in the conference the other day, where that's also the pressure from ownership. Finally, right? That one, this is cheap labor. Two, this is income for the club that's not being mined. And without saying it, Pat Onstad has essentially, like the coaches who haven't given minutes to these younger players in the academy, admitted that the academy isn't doing the right job, because Brooklyn Reigns, who's the top prospect, came out of the Barcelona, Arizona academy, was acquired through Real Salt Lake, because obviously there's these weird rules with MLS rights and academy players. But I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. The academy prospect right now, the homegrown player, to look out for in Houston, isn't even Houstonian. He was a guy imported earlier this year. And I mean, there's nothing against that, right? I mean, do it however it works.
Work like as a club bringing in these players, but yeah, the developing is important as well, isn't it?
Right, but there needs to be more development here. There has been players throughout the years, even before MLS, that went on to be MLS players at the time, and even now. The biggest one I'll mention is Chris Richards, who's obviously now just made his Premier League debut with Crystal Palace. Right, went through the FC Dallas Academy and from Alabama, and that partnership with Bayern Munich. That's how he made the jump. But Chris Richards was playing here locally with the Houston Texans Youth Soccer Club, which doesn't exist, and there's versions out there about that. But passed through Houston. The coaches there at the time said, if this guy, I applaud them, because they looked out for his development. They said, if this guy's going to make it, I mean, if we put him in a Dynamo Academy, his career is essentially going to go to dust, right? Because they're having prospects and they haven't been moved up. Took him to FC Dallas, and now you see what kind of player he is, and that's just like a little sample, right? So I do think, overall, the situation here in Houston, soccer wise, right, football wise, it is deeper than just a head coaching position. There is a lot of work ahead for Pat Onstad. I think, I think maybe they lack speaking to more people locally, not getting as much grasp of the severity of the situation, if we can put it that way. I think he's realized that now, being a year here, and you can kind of hear that in the press conference the other day. But certainly the head coaching position is a quick fix. If you bring somebody experienced with the first team, I mean, that's somebody that should be able to get more out of these players, or more of a say in where the roster should go, right? I mean, there's a lot of things we don't know about this season. Maybe Nagamura said and signed up and said, I can do it with this roster, and to fail with this roster, I mean, you can understand why the club might have said, well, you told us, right? You told us this is the route we could go. Again, we talked at the beginning, we talked about how fast that the search was. The reason they supposedly fired him now at this point is to get a leg up on that search now, have a little bit more time than last year. Obviously, fans want the best candidate. People are shouting Marcelo Bielsa. They want him to be. They want this to be his passion project, right? There's rumors, obviously, here. There's a lot of Mexican media because of again, just the way it is here locally with how close it is to Mexico. The rumors about Tata Martino potentially leaving the Mexican national team after the World Cup. Obviously, he did a great job with Atlanta United. They won the MLS Cup in 2018. That's another name out there. Tuco Mohamed mentioned as a free agent, so he's out there. And we'll see where they go from here. I asked on that, I mean, is there that kind of support from the ownership? And he kind of gave me the still early in the coaching search stage of it, but certainly if that's the way we wanted to go, and we would go to ownership and see if he would back it up with the check, right? And that certainly seems to be the case with Hector Herrera. That's kind of how it happened. They had, here's an idea. They went to the owner. The owner said, go for it. And so I think for that reason, there is a lot of optimism now in where this is going. I think for as much of a shock as this seems, this is actually a good news for the Houston Dynamo, because this isn't a move that would have been done years ago with the prior coach. They would have had another season, which I think is what everybody expected would happen.
Yeah, exactly.
To see this kind of proactiveness is refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard on Nagamura personally, but the fact that the club are now thinking, let's not wait, give him the beginning of next season, then it doesn't work, and you all of a sudden lose a transfer window, you lose the chance for to put their stamp on a team, and you lose a whole season. So I guess that's the silver lining from a fan's point of view for the Dynamo, knowing that, okay, they're now giving yourself sort of like 4 or 5 months to really get prepared for the next season, rather than the quick turnaround they had beginning of this one. And see, Kenny Bundy's taken over till the end of the season, and Dynamo DOS have been performing quite well. So do you think this is a chance to say, right, well, this is where our season is now? You've mentioned obviously Brooklyn Reigns, he's had his debut. Do you think we could see some more players try to get a little bit more experience now in this end of the season, to see if they're ready for next year?
That's certainly what fans have been asking for. They've been saying, play the kids, right? Brooklyn Reigns just got his debut the other night against Seattle, so I would expect that he would probably be able to get more playing time in his last 5 games. Marcelo Palomino has been on, and Juan Castilla, who both have been important players for Dynamo too. Still very young, maybe for the MLS level. I think the lack of maybe development and maybe dominating a little bit more the MLS Next Pro level to making that huge jump to MLS is what's been part of the hesitation of the previous coaches. But I think those are players that fans are eager to see, and well, certainly Bundy has experience with those guys. Beto Avila is another player that was in Dynamo too. Signed earlier this year and then moved up the roster, and that one's a bit of a head scratcher, because he seemed like he was a fast-paced kid. He was going to add speed on the wings, right younger legs that the club didn't have, and then he just kind of got scratched from the first team a little bit. But that, I would say that would be another player to sort of look for in this final stretch, and we'll see what Bundy does. It's also a guy, former professional player in the United States. I play with, I believe, the Dallas Sidekicks indoor. Made his life here in Houston. Has been a Dynamo Academy coach for a long time. Got promoted to the Dynamo 2 when the MLS Next Pro League started earlier this year. So in a way, it's somebody that's been within the organization for a long time. Now moving on to the first team, and it's certainly his audition. I don't know how ready he is also for this level, but he has 5 games to audition and maybe even start steering some of the heads of the club.
Yeah, it'd be good to get an eye on what they can do, like, rather than putting them in at maybe the beginning of next season, knowing a little bit more pressure, isn't there? I guess it's some of that pressure's off younger players when this is your chance to get used to the environment, rather than we need 3 points here. Off you go.
Right. I'll also add real quick, Hector Herrera has been injured these last 3 games, but there's a question mark about how much he'll play, if he's ready to play. Obviously, he's trying to get in rhythm for the World Cup, so that might be a player too that could get minutes. I don't think the expectation, regardless of the injury. I mean, Seattle plays on turf. We saw what that did to Tim Parker. I think Memo Rodriguez left injured in that game as well. So I don't think they were going to risk Herrera anyways. But the rest of the 5 games are on grass, so maybe there's more of a chance that we see Hector Herrera in this final stretch.
Okay, and obviously going into next season, there'll be the new manager. You brought in Thor Ulfarsson through the super draft. Do you think that's going to be another key area for the club as they're looking through their scouting ready for next year? And because he's had full time
again, and I know I've given you a lot of long-winded answers, but I mean, I think that that's another situation, right? The getting talent out of the super draft has been somewhere where the club has missed for years, right? That's another way to kind of bring in players in an affordable way. Thor Ulfarsson has been a great find, I think, in that sense. Before he got injured as well, he was, I would say, making an argument for Rookie of the Year. He actually had a change in position. Nagamura was using him more as a winger.
Yeah.
Maybe to get him on the field with Sebastian Ferreira at the same time. But I think initially the thought process was that he would be a replacement, coming on for games for Ferreira in that forward number 9 position. But yeah, he's certainly a player to look for, and one with a lot of promise. I think that's another one too. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, whoever it is that they go for next year, there are those players there that you mentioned, like for our channel. There is a base of players that can be really useful in the roster and should be a playoff side. It's just trying to organize what the style of play will be and who the best players to bring in to fit that system, and hopefully Pat Osdad and those that are involved in the hiring of the next manager have a much clearer philosophy. Maybe I guess that's maybe something that's with the rush to, like as we said, to get Nagamura in the beginning, maybe that was lost slightly, and things have had to be chopped and changed a bit too much, maybe in this season. But who is your money on if you were to be making this decision? Who would you like to see?
Man, I would say if a guy like Bielsa is available, I'd like to see. Honestly, I like for the market, I think, and for the reception, and I think because it fits the players that you have, especially your biggest star, which is Herrera, right? And you're going to get the best out of him now that, let's face it, the World Cup's on his mind as well. That was going to be a hurdle. After the World Cup's over, this guy's going to be 100% focused in MLS, right? Getting the best out of him, I think. I know you don't want to maybe decide on a player, but I think this is an important player to decide around. I get somebody out of the Mexican League. Turco Muhammad, I think would be great. I think for dramatic purposes and making the press conferences more interesting, I think maybe a Tuca Ferretti. But I don't know how much into Liga MX they want to go. I mean, if the money's there, again, there's some promising coaches in Mexico. There's Alarcamón who's coaching Puebla, right? Yeah, has done great work. I mean, I would go maybe that. I would go that route because again. Because for the name recognition here locally, for the market, for the style of players that they have, for the climate of Houston, I would go that route. Or if they really want an MLS experienced coach, which is something they banged the drum on, I would say get an MLS experienced coach. Just because Nagamura played in MLS doesn't make him an MLS experienced coach, right? Yeah. I would say, you see it in the NFL and in other bigger sports. I mean, even around the world. Open up the checkbook then and look at maybe some of the successful teams in MLS and negotiate to get maybe a coach from another team. I don't know if I don't know, maybe a Giovanni Savarese, who at some point probably had interest in the job. If he's kind of out of his way in Portland, you negotiate with the Portland Timbers, right, and bring him here. That might be a way to go. Tata Martino was mentioned as well, right? But I think that the thing there is you got to start negotiating with him, maybe sooner rather than later, because obviously Mexico said they want to make a decision in January, but that might be that might be too late to start negotiating with him. But yeah, I know that's kind of maybe a wide open answer, but that's the route I would take personally because of what this club can be. Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, that's great.
And somebody, real quick, somebody with experience also, and that's why I go to Mexico, with experience in using the young level, right? To have a look at talent look at the academy and sort of say, all right, listen, from my opinion, this isn't working. This is where this has to change. That's also an element that maybe gets underseen a little bit because obviously it's focused on the first team, but that's something Houston has to fix.
Definitely. Brilliant. Victor, thanks very much for joining. That's been a really interesting chat. And we're looking forward to seeing what happens with the Dynamo over these next sort of couple of months, probably. I don't think there'll be anything too quickly out on a new manager, but you never know in MLS, do you? Can you remind
I think it'll take a while, yeah.
Yeah. Can you remind everyone where we can find you on Twitter and where you're writing from, just so everyone can keep up to date?
Yeah, at Victor Araiza, all together, Araiza. That's where you can find me on Twitter. Get the latest on Houston, and I'll try to mix it in with some other stuff. But that's basically where you can see all the content, podcast, the MLS shows, everything we do, and obviously the striker.com. It is a subscription website, but the first 30 days are free, so we don't charge you until after a month. If you don't like it, just give it a try and see if you like the content. But I think a lot of people that try it, even if they sign up and hit cancel, I think they sort of say, all right, you know what, this is the kind of coverage that pretty good coverage, local coverage. I would say it's affordable, and we're trying to do the best we can. You get Dynamo, Theo Lloyd Hughes does a great job covering here locally. The Dash. We have other great NWSL writers. If you want to do MLS, Austin FC, FC Dallas, Atlanta United, LAFC, LA Galaxy, and I think the more we're a little bit more successful, the more we have more support. I think the more we get to grow a little more. So certainly, it's think of it as investment for the long term.
Exactly, brilliant, Victor. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to hopefully catching up again soon once the new manager's been confirmed and having a little chat about what we can expect from them. Brilliant.
Thank you, Michael. Anytime.
So there we have it. It's been a tough year. It's cost Nagamura his job, but action has been taken now so that there can be a little bit more of a thought out process going into the 2023 season instead of the rush that happened this year and the mistakes that have unfortunately been made. Thanks again for listening, guys. Thanks again to Victor. You can follow me at Mike Rice 1983 on Twitter. Please hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to bringing you some more news from around the MLS soon. Thanks very much, guys. Take care.